Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Galetz, and I'm an industry education coordinator working with the Regina District Industry Education Council and SunWest School Division. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Weeb, who works in Saskatoon as a draftsperson. Eric is a graduate of Rochetown Central High School, and Eric will talk to us about his occupation and the career training he has taken to get here. Just a reminder before we begin, this session is being recorded and will appear on the RDIEC YouTube channel for you or others to view in the future. We'd also like to request that any students who watch this session go to our website at www.rdiec.ca and complete the student survey that can be found near the top of the website's homepage. Completion of the survey gets your name in a monthly draw for a $50 gift card. Again, the website is www.rdiec.ca. So welcome, Eric, and we'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so welcome. About myself, when asked, I call myself a draftsman and 3D designer specializing in agricultural processing facilities. And the diploma I got calls me an engineering technologist, which I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on later. And also, I have been self-employed for about a year and a half after putting in 5 years with the same company in an office setting. So I'll also talk a little about the differences between those two ways of working. Okay, so what my job boils down to essentially is that there's a really motivated engineer who goes out and gets facility design work, or other people come to him because they know him by experience and reputation, and he figures out what equipment the client needs, or they tell him what they need and come up with a rough idea how to put it all together, and then I build that on my computer to see if it looks like it'll work, or if it doesn't work, I try my own ideas, and eventually we sort of put together a concept that's presented to the client, and then the client makes first suggestions or changes their mind 100 times about their requirements, and eventually it either gets built or it doesn't. And if it does, sometimes we manage that process to helping coordinate with structural and civil engineers to turn our conceptual buildings and structures into something that can actually be made. I put together a lot of technical drawings, arrangement drawings that tell contractors how to set up the facility and where to put everything, and also procurement ones we give to equipment suppliers to tell them what we need, especially if we have really precise or unusual requirements, and quite frequently we do. Here's just a little example of concept to reality. On the left is what I would see in my 3D environment, and on the right there is they sent us a photo after they put in this particular stack of equipment. This is just one really small corner of a bigger line and facility. All right, so as far as skills, the first skill set you need just to get through the engineering technologist diploma program, there's a huge variety of specialties you can get a diploma in. So there's a civil, structural, architectural, mechanical, electrical, manufacturing, and so on. It's not as bad as a university program where you might have to go through a whole bunch of really irrelevant classes for their ideas of well-rounded education and because they want to take your money. Every class you take in this diploma program is potentially useful in your discipline, but you're probably going to not end up needing to use all of them or even most of them in your eventual job. I do know a couple people who didn't make it through the diploma program because they couldn't make it through calculus or thermodynamics and that sort of stuff, which is stuff I have never used in my job and completely forgotten by now. So yeah, but you do have to have a good head for math to get through this program. For my job personally, the whole thing is kind of like doing a puzzle where you know what you're making, but you don't have a picture on the box to reference, or kind of like building a Lego set without instructions, but you have an idea of what you're supposed to make. And also you have to make all the parts yourself first. So you usually have better instructions when you're making the parts. If I'm going to make a 3D model of a real specific piece of equipment, first I get the company that actually makes it to send me drawings of it first, and then I build it in my 3D environment and then place it into the facility. You also always have to think about how the equipment is being used and accessed for use and general maintenance. You can't build a facility where everything works if the workers can't reach the machine controls because they're 10 feet in the air and 6 inches in front of a wall. That's not going to work. Okay, so facility, where does an engineering technologist work? It really depends on your job. Despite all of us taking the same course, the people I went to school with all work in a variety of different environments. So ostensibly the program we went through was for manufacturing specifically. So some of my classmates work in an office attached to a production facility where they get to leave the office and go out into the shop floor and look at their stuff being built. And I don't quite have that luxury. Some of my classmates took their general skill set and they put it to use in another discipline. There's a few people working at City Hall doing civil drafting for the city, you know, sewers and sidewalks and exciting things like that. I myself worked in just a regular old commercial office until that company shut down. And now my workstation is, you know, 6 feet to the left of me here. It's in my living room beside my couch. This is, I guess, going to be a lot more common going forward, even for people who aren't self-employed. You know, as businesses now realize there's money to be saved by not having to have a big office if their employees don't need to be face-to-face to do their jobs. So you know, that's one thing that, you know, it's a result of COVID. It's going to change the way we work in the future, I think. As far as equipment, you know, what do I use to do my job? I use SolidWorks on a reasonably beefy computer, and that's it. I don't really get to access any fun tools, but I did want to point out there is a good video on YouTube called SAS Polytech 3D Printing and Education that shows some of the tools that I would have used at school or that I could have used if I was going there now and not in 2014. Because every year they get more cool things, you know, 3D printers, welding robots, laser cutters, plasma cutters, CNC programmable equipment where you learn to write the code that the machine uses to carve up metal into the shape that you want, or not if your code didn't work at all. As far as the rewards of the occupation, I think being an engineering technologist is an opportunity to get good or at least decent pay for doing something that's pretty creative if you're lucky. If your main motivation is money, I would say consider getting a full engineering degree from university, though. One of the advantages to the technologist level is you don't get bogged down in all the regulatory paperwork and red tape that the engineers have to deal with. And so if the facility I make falls down, I don't have any legal liability because it's on the engineers, everyone who signed off on things I made or, you know, remade things I made. It's all on them. So, well, I can't speak for all engineering technologists, but even when I'm really busy, I don't consider it a high stress job. And I also really enjoy what I do most of the time. All jobs kind of have boring aspects to them, but I think I spend a lot more time doing interesting design work rather than the boring stuff like procurement drawings. And I really don't have to do paperwork. The only paperwork I ever do is sending bills to clients, which is super simple. As far as challenges of the occupation, I'd say the biggest challenge of my job is making sure everything gets out the door on time. I'm usually juggling multiple projects at different stages of development, and I have to be able to, you know, decide what to do and in what order to do it in to make as many people as happy as possible. You got some people who don't realize that they're not the only job you're working on. You're working on 10 others at the same time, and everybody has certain things they want to get out before the weekend, or, you know, so on. But happy clients equal repeat business, and repeat business equals being able to do this for as long as possible. Thankfully, I work with a really good engineer who's very on top of things, and he's actually better at estimating how much time that I need to do a job than I am. And over about 6 years doing this job, I can probably still count on one hand the amount of times I've really felt pressure that I had to get something done ASAP for a tight deadline. But it is also important to realize that there is only so high you can get at the technologist level. You know, an engineering technologist isn't going to get promoted into being an engineer. That's a different thing entirely. You can absolutely take on more responsibilities. I know engineering technologists who become project managers who, you know, you get more money for doing that, or you become a team head. You can be the head of the drafting department if you have a big drafting department, design department. But unless you're really lucky, you're not going to get super high up in the company at the technologist level. That goes to, you know, people with business degrees or engineering degrees or both, and a lot of experience. So it's only so high you can climb as a eng tech. Salary is tough to say because engineering technologist covers a huge variety of disciplines, and there's lots of variety of things you can be doing in it. So some disciplines do tend to get better paid than others, and some employers are definitely going to try to lowball you. I think I'm sort of in the mid-range as far as what like starting salaries you're going to get as far as manufacturing engineering tech. But when I was interviewing for my first job out of school, I definitely had an offer that was, you're going to start at 6 a.m. every morning and make minimum wage. And I was like, no, thank you. I ended up starting about $4,000 a month plus, the bare legal minimum for paid holidays and sick days. And after 5 years, I really was only making marginally more than that. It seems like these days, the really only good way to get good, consistent raises is you gain experience and you jump ship to another company. It's not inconceivable that you could make 100 grand a year at this level at the height of your career, but it's also, again, not super likely. Or your company could go under and you could take that experience and work as a solo contractor instead of drawing a salary, in which case it absolutely is possible to clear $100,000 in a year, while almost never working a 40-hour week. But I'd say the majority of engineering technologists probably work in an office and they do 40 hours a week. And if you're in a manufacturing environment, you might be able to grab some overtime and get overtime pay for that sort of thing. Educational requirements. You're going to need, at least just to get into the diploma program, you're going to need to get your 30 level math and your physics. I actually didn't take physics in high school and I had to do it via distance learning, which was interesting. I would just say you check the post-secondary programs requirements page. They'll tell you what you need from high school. So post-secondary was you can get this at Sask Polytech or any other tech school if you're not going to stay in Saskatchewan. They tend to be 2 or 3 year diplomas. The 3-year ones usually include some work experience stuff where they place you with a company or you find a placement and you do a little bit of work in between your courses, which I think is nice. It would have been nice if I'd had the opportunity for that. That wasn't what one of my benefits to my program. So there's a few different engineering technology programs that you can take and different, each one isn't offered in each location in Saskatoon. So I just thought I'd write down a few of them on the board here. CAD/CAM is the one I did and is no longer a thing. I kind of joke I'm getting old because the school I went to is no longer called the same thing and the program I went to is no longer called what it was called when I was there. So I went to CAD/CAM engineering technology at SciAst, and the closest thing to that now is design and manufacturing engineering technology at Sask Polytech in Saskatoon. But Moose Jaw offers some things, and I think Regina has a couple equivalent stuff. As far as my journey goes, I went to the U of S without an actual plan. I was one of those. I was a product of the old school of thinking where they said, just go to university and get a degree, get any degree. Which nowadays I don't think that's a viable thing anymore that they should be telling kids to do. So I went to the U of S without a plan. I took random arts and science classes I was interested in, but I didn't have an end goal in mind, and I dropped out after 2 years because I was sick of wasting the money. I didn't want to take out more loans for stuff I didn't think was leading anywhere. So dropped out of that, worked as a line cook for a while, which I absolutely do not recommend to anyone. And then after that, I worked retail until I couldn't stand that anymore, and I quit with a vague notion of going back to school without really knowing what I wanted to do still, even after all those years. But I didn't want to commit to trying a 4-year degree again or continuing my half a degree that wasn't pointed at anything. So my parents actually suggested that I try SciAst. And so I looked at it and I picked a course that looked interesting, and turned out I ended up really liking it. So after school, I was hired right out of school by a company that needed a technologist for their new engineering department in a specialty I knew absolutely nothing about, which was the agricultural sector, which is not something we covered at all at school. And on a program I knew almost nothing about. They were SolidWorks users. They already had SolidWorks seats, and I had learned entirely on Inventor, which is SolidWorks and Inventor are like the Pepsi and Coke of the 3D drafting programs. You know, they do the same thing but differently. I'd say that the adage of fake it till you make it is a very true thing, because I went in and I said, you know, they said, could you do this? I said, yeah. I said, yeah, sure, I can do it. I decided that, you know, if nothing else, you have a little bit of industry experience looks better on a resume than none at all. So I took a job that I could get and I thought I could, you know, work at for a while, and it ended up lasting 5 years for me. So I can't go into the complete details, especially since this is going to be on YouTube eventually, but I was hired on at a very strange time in the company's life. There was lots of upheaval and stuff I can't really talk about that ended up with a change in the company's ownership that actually ended up in an entire change in what the company was doing. So there, shortly after, you know, a couple of years of being hired, there was no engineering department anymore, and I was just waiting for someone to come around to my office and saying, hey, get out of here, we don't do what you're doing anymore. And that never happened. I just kept hanging on. At one point, I ended up being the most senior person in that company and just doing my own thing in SolidWorks, where everybody else was offering kind of like business management services. It's kind of strange. Eventually that business shut down, but I wanted to keep doing my SolidWorks facility design work because I really enjoyed it and I was good at it. And my major client, who was formerly an employee of that company leading their engineering department, he started his own company, and he didn't have employees. He said he didn't want employees, but he would be more than happy to continue working with me, and he'd be paying me what he was paying my old company to keep me doing the same job. And this shouldn't be a surprise, but what he was paying my old company was significantly more than what was trickling down to me. So that's nice. That was a year and a half ago, and still doing that today, and we are busier than ever before. So the points, I thought I'd just make a little slide and say the points that I'm trying to make here are, you know, I don't think it's a good idea to just jump into university without a plan anymore. Maybe it is for some people, but in my experience, I didn't get anything out of it without having a plan. But I do absolutely recommend checking out Sask Polytech. When I was younger, there was definitely the idea that if you were one of the top students or whatever, you were definitely going to a four-year university, and you know, tech school and trade school was not even a thing they talked to me about. And I absolutely recommend checking it out. I had a fantastic experience, and I would do it again if I could and had the opportunity. So the school I never really considered, and a program I didn't know existed, and a job that only was a little bit related to what I even studied, led me to a career that I really like and I'm good at, and I'm very happy that I followed down the path that I did. So my main point is, if you don't know what you want to do, or if you know exactly what you want to do, that's great. You know, my sister knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life and started exactly down a program to do that, but I had no idea, and I didn't start at SciAS till my mid-20s. I had classmates who were just out of high school, and I had at least one classmate in their 50s, so who'd already had one career and wanted a new one. So, you know, SciAS is for everybody, or Sask Polytech, I guess is what it's called. As far as opportunities in my field, the job market for Eng Techs is large and wide. So especially since you don't need to work in your specific field, like I said, most of my training was in, you know, manufacturing technology, how to, you know, make parts for things. And I'm doing facility design now, which is somebody else makes the parts and I put them in a building. But, you know, every level of government needs draftspersons. And so with pretty much any engineering technology program, you can get into public sector. Although if you're interested in that to begin with, you know, civil and architectural is where you'd want to start. The private sector, any company that makes anything is going to need somebody to design that equipment or to, you know, make the drawings for the equipment. So you'd work with an engineering team. Or there's self-employment. You know, you take your skills and you, instead of becoming an employee for that company, you shop around other companies and you say, hey, do you want you know, a draftsman designer that you don't have to pay benefits to, you know, that sort of thing. So the chances for advancement are, like I said earlier, you can only climb so high as a tech. If you want the corner office and the company car, you're going to need to slide into management. And if that's really your goal, may I suggest a business program somewhere. But as far as what this could lead to, you know, you can go into project management. There was a former coworker I had was an eng tech and ended up leaving to become a pretty high level project management for some corporate or not government infrastructure that I probably shouldn't mention, but and there was one of my teachers, one or more of my teachers at SciAst was actually a product of the CAD/CAM program. He graduated from that, went out into industry for a little while, and then he liked SAS Polytech so much that he went back and became a teacher in the CAD/CAM program. So I thought that was pretty neat, and is always something I do think about as being potential next step. As far as life-work balance goes, like I said, there's a huge variety of careers you can do, so it really just depends where you work. I do know people who do the week in, week out thing, which I guess might be fine for some, not really something I'd be interested in. But most of the time, if you're an engineering tech, you're going to be in the standard 40-hour a week, working out of the office or maybe working out of a home office. I myself never work 40 hours a week. When we're okay, not never, but very, very rarely. We've been super busy lately, and I've been putting in about that. But for the majority of my time, I have been cutting myself off at 32, 35, that sort of thing, because the 8-hour day is a compromise from an earlier time, and sometimes I don't often feel like I'm super useful by the very end of an 8-hour day. So does anybody have any questions?
Eric, just a question here. I think you made some good points about, the university versus the SAS Polytech training and stuff like that. What do you, and you had some advice for 18-year-olds. What could a 17 or 18-year-old student in high school do to help them with those decisions? To me, that's the kind of the basic issue is, university versus SAS Polytech. What do you recommend that they could do it when they're at that age to try to help them with that? Because there's going to be some students watching this, and
yeah,
the same thing you're at. I don't know what to do. Maybe I feel there's pressure to go to university, and I'm capable of it, but maybe I don't know if I want to do it. What do you think?
Well, it is tough because, I knew I had no real idea what I wanted to do. It was many years ago. I don't know. Maybe you even remember that. I didn't really have a plan in mind. And if someone had suggested SAS Polytech, even to me, as a 17-year-old, I'm not sure I would have really thought that hard about it because I'd never really had much experience with the trade types of work, and honestly, I didn't even know this program existed. It's one of those things you don't think about on career day. Everybody knows engineers and doctors and whatever, but nobody really thinks about the people that help the engineers get things made, that sort of thing. I would say really just like they tend to have career days, or their website has some virtual stuff on it that explains some of their programs. I would say just explore as much as you can, which is something I really didn't do in high school. I wasn't looking around at what different schools offered and what I thought I could get out of it, which I think was definitely an error on my part for not being as open to everything as I should have, despite not having much of a plan myself. I would just tell everybody who has even the smallest amount of interest in it, or even who doesn't even think they have the interest in it, to just go check out what SAS Polytech or other trade and tech schools offer, because there's so many things that they offer there that I had no idea was something you could do for a career.
Comes down to more exploration of those options, kind of, in a sense.
Yeah, it's like look around what's there.
Take time to do that. Take time to invest in that. Yeah.
I want to thank Eric for kind of keeping it real, because I think there's a lot of students that are kind of in the same boat as he was. I really appreciated the line, you went to a school that you didn't know existed, you took a course that you didn't know anything about. And I think that's the story for a lot of students. And I think for those students that are going to listen to this, I don't want to say a percentage, but I think a lot of students don't necessarily spend their high school days looking potentially past you know, maybe the grad party. I mean, I don't know that, but I'm just saying, I think this is keeping it real, and you've kind of given given us some, you know, outlook on that perspective. The one question I had for you was, you know, you're a self-employed draftsperson, and you know, the job that you're doing now happened to come as a result of working with somebody. How else could you market yourself to get the job? I mean, obviously this connection that you have right now is I want to say pay the bills, right? But what else could a student do?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's something that I don't, you know, myself really have any experience in. You know, I never had really sought out to be self-employed. This was honestly just an extension of the job I was already doing. And, you know, I say clients plural, but I really do just have one client that keeps me so busy. I'm not searching for others right now. There is definitely online avenues for it. My thought there is that I think people don't know what they're worth when they, you know, especially when they start out, but even as they get experience, you know, like I said, I didn't realize how much I would get paid for working hourly, you know, versus how much I was getting paid on my old salary. Excuse me. I think it's another thing where you really have to check out what's there. But I would also say that the idea of jumping into self-employment immediately after school, after obtaining these skills, is probably not very viable. There's a SolidWorks community online that I occasionally look at, and somebody was talking about that, and I was just thinking, well, you know, every company that you might want to, you know, sell yourself to, they already, all the big ones, all the companies that you know, they already have an engineering department that they're paying. They have a draftsman department that they're paying. And if you're looking at you know, advertising yourself kind of the same way a handyman would, you know, putting out an ad online saying, hey, I have these skills, I would charge you this much for this many hours, you would have to be really conscious of the legal implications, what you're responsible for, and as far as insurance goes. You know, if you're telling somebody you can, you know, you have this experience, and yeah, I'll help you draft up a drawing for your new deck or your gazebo or something. If that falls down, you probably do have some legal liability because you're not an engineer and you can't sign off on it. But if you want to do something more like some people are really good at small scale, just 3D design. Like I tend to think of structures and machinery because it's what I do. But you know, you can make little miniatures or figures, or you know, just little knickknacks and stuff, and you know that there's no legal issues with. You just go online and tell people, here's something I can do for you. These, you know, put together a portfolio of stuff you've designed and hope people come to you. But unfortunately, I don't really have a good answer for the best avenues to do that because I haven't done it myself.
No, but those are some good points, Eric. I think that's what students need to hear too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned I was kind of keeping it real. I sort of think that's a thing that I do best. I do tend to be the glass half empty guy, but you know, be realistic as to what your opportunities are, and you know, you're going to have limitations.
Yeah, good point. Another question from our office here.
Yeah, Eric, with your classes so far, upgrading to something like a project manager, or even if you decided to go the engineering route, are there classes that you've taken that would transfer?
Okay, yes, good point. And that is something I forgot to mention that I really should have. You absolutely can take what you've learned and take your Sask Polytech or et cetera credits and apply them to something further. They do mention this while you're in the program, is there are a number of other universities that will accept Sask Polytech credits. Like if I had decided to, I could have taken my 2-year diploma and have put that as probably, you know, 1 year towards a university degree at certain. And it's only specific universities, and U of S was not one of them, but that accepted the SIAST credits, as part ways into your university credits. So if you did, go all the way through engineering technologist and find out you had a real aptitude for the mathematical stuff, you absolutely can say, you know what, I'm just going to build on this and go get a full-on engineering degree. SAS Polytech is expanding quite a bit, even from just a few short years ago I was there. I have them on Facebook, and I can always see they're offering new things, and they've started like a kind of, I think it's sort of like project management. They had another fancier word for it, but a project management type thing that actually uses your SciAS credits or your SAS Polytech credits to get you in. Like it was meant to be a continuation course for people who've already done a technology diploma. So I thought that was pretty nice. And then there is also the PMP is a thing lots of engineers and engineering adjacent people take. That's an unrelated thing. It's an exam that you buy the book for, and you read it and study it, and then you apply to take this examination. And it's called your Project Management Professional certification, and a lot of people go that route too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Another question for me, Eric, would be self-employed and then working at home. And I agree, probably COVID is changing the kind of the shape of the face of where we work for a lot of people. And a job like yours where maybe the only piece of equipment needed is a computer, and so you can work. What kind of discipline does it take? I mean, so like you're self-employed and you are working from home. So do you find it difficult? Like, there's some days you're gonna do this today, or?
No, not really. I always say it's kind of funny because I started working from home 3 or 4 months before COVID really became a thing. So it was cool that I worked from home, and it was kind of unusual that I worked from home. And then COVID came along and made that a whole lot less special because all of a sudden everybody was working from home. Personally, I honestly do not find it that much different in terms of getting through the workday. Even when I was working at an office, if I was having a day where I just didn't feel like I was accomplishing much, or I just wasn't in the right headspace, I'd be up and out of my desk 100 times a day, going to the coffee maker and going to talk to one of my other coworkers. And I haven't found working at home to be at all more distracting. In fact, I find the major benefit of it is that, when I was working for salary, right, that was 8-hour days, which were actually 8.5 because, nobody pays you for lunch anymore. That's another modern reality thing. You don't get paid lunch anymore. But not only that, I was also, the time I spent going to and from my apartment, in the morning and in the afternoon, that's also unpaid work. So it really was, not so much work, but your time is not your own. So I was getting a salary, but it was really equating to, working 9 or 10 hours in terms of time that is not my own. And now my alarm clock goes off at 9 o'clock, and I roll out of bed. 10 seconds later, I'm on my computer, beginning my workday. And when I feel like I've done all I can do, and my head is just, I'm not focusing at all anymore, I can just say, I'm done for the day. I don't have an obligation to an employer to stare at the screen for an extra 1.5 hours waiting out the clock. I just, I tell my client, by the way, I'm done for the day.
So less wasted hours and more focused hours then, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of work-life balance, it's fantastic. That was like, I was like getting 2 extra hours in the day just available all of a sudden because I wasn't wasting them anymore with preparing or commute or any of that stuff, waiting for the bus because I don't drive. I don't have to wait for the bus anymore.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good. Any other questions for Renette?
No, I think we're good. Thanks so much, Eric. This was an awesome presentation. And like I said, I'm just going to say you kept it real, and I think it's really good for students to hear that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I think I'll stop the recording now. We can talk for a minute after that if you want.
Okay, I can hit my stop sharing thing.
Yeah, awesome.